Hello, this is Jeff with Mississippi in the Civil War. Thanks for coming back. I've told one big story so far in three parts, the history of the Army in Northern Virginia as it relates to Mississippi's involvement. Today I want to tell you a little story. These are the kinds of stories I really like, the stories about the men who actually fought the battles. I've never been so much into, big stories about the big generals, Lee, Grant, Jackson. I like telling the stories of the little guys, the privates and the corporals and the captains and the colonels, the men that actually fought these battles. That I like to tell the stories that haven't been told, and the story I'm going to tell you today is one of those stories, and it's a story about the Battle of Resaca, Georgia. And this story involves a veteran named John Calvin Portis, who was from Newton County, Mississippi. And long after the war, he wrote a letter about the Battle of Resaca to a woman in Georgia that he had never met. And I'm just going to read you this letter. And it's headlined Union, Newton County, Mississippi, June 17th, 1896. And it begins, Dear Madam, I send herewith $1 in stamps to be used in your society on Soldier Cemetery at Resaca. I have no brother or other near or even distant relative sleeping on that glorious field that I know of, but 7 of my regiment lie there. I will append the names that I remember. My good right arm lies about a mile south of Resaca, Georgia, just north of a church at the root of a large oak or chestnut tree. It was put in a board box and buried by a comrade. Hence you will see I feel an interest in the wild hills of Resaca. So yes, John Calvin Portis had a very good reason to remember the Battle of Resaca. It was his last battle. He lost his arm in that battle. He lost a lot of good friends in that battle. So he had very strong memories of this battle. And his letter continues, I was a private in Company B, 8th Mississippi Volunteer Infantry, and was wounded in the right shoulder and throat about dark in a charge on the enemy's works, May 14th, 1864. And this is a picture of John Calvin Portis taken many years after the war. In fact, it's from his obituary that was published in Confederate Veteran magazine. The engraving is a period illustration of the Battle of Resaca. It's a particular favorite of mine, that's why I used it. But his letter continues, I was carried back to the bluff below the bridge, where about 300 or 400 poor fellows were lying torn, bleeding, and some dying. After a time I crossed the bridge, and faint and sick, I was trying to make my way to Cheatham's Division Hospital, which was in the church. A man came into the road with an ox wagon loaded in part with beds which appeared to be very white. Someone called him Moats and asked him about his family, and he said they had all gone on to Calhoun. Never shall I forget the morning of that fateful 14th of May, when at early dawn the signal guns told us in tones of thunder that both armies were ready for the work of death. Bright rose the sun, tipping mountain peak with blooming rays of silver and bathing valley and woodland in a flood of golden light, a scene never to be witnessed again by hundreds of the boys who wore the blue and the gray. In the streets of Resaca that day I saw enacted a deed of heroism which challenged the admiration of all who witnessed it. A wagon occupied by several ladies was passing along north of the river and just west of the railroad when a Yankee battery opened fire on it, and until it had passed over the bridge poured a storm of shells around it. A young woman stood erect in the wagon, waving her hat, which was dressed with red or had a red ribbon or plume on it, seeming to defy the cowards that would make war on defenseless women. I felt then, and I do today, for that woman a man could freely die. Many a rebel boy felt as I did that day. I was taken from the church to a bush arbor on the west side of the railroad where I expected to die. A middle-aged woman dressed in black came with nourishment and, God bless her, fed me, and during that awful day ministered to the wants of the wounded and dying. If I remember correctly, she came often to me with food and drink. Who she was I may never know, but she was a noble woman. And again, there's no telling who that was. There were many civilian women that would aid wounded and sick after the battles, and it could have been any one of numerous Southern women. And I'm certainly sure Portis would have loved to have met her and thanked her for her help, but fortunately he had no idea who she was, as he never got her name. And his letter continues, "Will you, kind lady, bear with me while I relate just another incident of that Sunday? Perched upon the top of a lofty tree near the church was a mockingbird, warbling his sweet notes of joy and gladness, ever now and then darting out to catch a minnie ball as it went singing by. But my comrade told me my little bird sang on until dark. I first called attention to that sweet songster, which it seemed was trying to cheer me in that dark hour of my young manhood. I am now 60 years old. My head is almost white. I have a noble son who was then a babe, now a prominent teacher. I have 2 sweet daughters and 5 little grandchildren who never tire of hearing grandfather tell of the time when death seemed so near, and they shed tears with me when looking at my empty sleeve. I tell them my good arm is sleeping in Georgia, and that sometime in the morning of the resurrection, God will restore my arm, but they cannot understand and become indignant at the Yankees." And this particular image I used is from the Library of Congress, and it shows a Union veteran, probably a member of the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, telling his stories to some a very interested audience of young boys. And boy, I wish I could have been there to hear those stories firsthand. And Portis continued his letter, "I fear I have worried you, and if you do not wish to keep this among the papers of the society, you can destroy it. I felt that I would like to write this, and that maybe someone would see if the tree is still standing, and perhaps find my lost arm a place in the soldiers' cemetery. If not, it can rest on until God shall bid it rise, and meet its long-severed companion, where war's dread alarm will be heard no more. May God bless the noble women of the sunny, sweet South in all their work of love and devotion to the memory of the heroes who fell battling for the lost cause. I hope that I may live to contribute more to aid you in your loyal task. Again, God bless you, dear ladies, is the prayer of Private John C. Portis, Company B, 8th Mississippi Regiment Volunteer Infantry, CSA, J.E. Jackson's Brigade, Walker's Division." And the lady to whom Portis was writing was Mrs. Elizabeth Simmons, who was president of the Ladies Memorial Association of Resaca, which had been founded in 1866 to establish a cemetery for the many Confederate dead buried around the city. And shown in this picture is a modern photograph of the Resaca Confederate Cemetery. And Simmons spearheaded a number of improvements to the cemetery at Resaca. And she was so committed to this cemetery that she actually asked that when she passed away that she be buried in the Confederate cemetery. And when she passed away in 1907, her request was honored, and today she is the only female buried in the Resaca Confederate Cemetery. Simmons was very grateful for the letter she received from John C. Portis, and for he revealed the names of a number of men in the 8th Mississippi that were buried at Resaca that they did not know about. And Miss Simmons very quickly penned him a reply, and it stated, "Calhoun, Georgia, July 1st, 1896. J.C. Portis, Union, Mississippi. Dear Sir, your kind and encouraging letter received. I return thanks for the association. Your letter gave us some information that we greatly desired, probably never would have gotten otherwise in regard to a group of graves 11 in number, We knew they were in the 8th Mississippi, that was all. You gave us Major Watkins' name, getting his correctly brought out of the other 10, which were almost entirely obliterated. We had begun to fear that this group of graves would have to be marked unknown. Thank you for the light. It is greatly appreciated. Rest assured I have given the resting place of your comrades special attention. They were buried in a beautiful shady place. A large crabapple tree has grown up in the center of the group. The improvements on the cemetery are not being completed as fast as we desire for the want of funds. We are placing a small marble headstone at each grave and want to enclose the grounds with a neat, substantial iron fence. The work is being done now and will be very substantial. Again, thanking you respectfully, I am Mrs. E.J. Simmons, President of the Memorial Association. And after he recovered from his wounding and amputation of his arm at Resaca, Portis was discharged from the Army, and he returned home to Union, Mississippi. After the war, he became a Methodist minister and a very much beloved figure in his community. He would very often meet with his former comrades who served in the 8th Mississippi. He loved to reminisce about the war, and it was said in his obituary, he nobly fought the battle of life, and now his armor has been laid by while he rests under the shade of trees. And John C. Portis passed away on October 31st, 1909, and is buried in the Memorial Park Cemetery at Union, Mississippi in Newton County. And in fact, this modern photo is of his grave at the Memorial Park Cemetery. And this is just a little story of somebody who, normally you wouldn't hear anything about. And I hope to tell more of these stories on the channel as time goes by. If anyone has any suggestions for a story you'd like to hear, leave me some comments. I would very seriously entertain doing some of them if you come up with some good ideas. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this this little presentation. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. And I hope to be doing this more. And thank you very much. Bye.